The trash bags hit the floor in front of my boots, loud enough to make my daughter flinch. Black plastic. Heavy. One of them split open. Old clothes spilled out like something being dumped at a curb. My sister stood up from the table, wine glass still in her hand, smiling like this was a joke everyone understood. She said we weren't family anymore. She said it clearly, slowly. Like she wanted my daughter to hear it too. The room laughed. Not awkward laughter. Real laughter. My mother didn't tell her to stop. She leaned forward, looked straight at my child, and said she didn't belong here either. Just a reminder of my mistakes. That's the word she used. Reminder. Someone told me to sit down. Eat. Shut up. Don't ruin Christmas like I ruined everything else. My brother laughed and nodded toward my daughter. Said this was what failure looked like. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I said thank you. I told them I'd remember this. I took my daughter's hand. Felt how cold her fingers were. And we walked out into the dark. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong. The door closed behind us with a soft click that felt louder than the laughter we left inside. Cold air hit my face. My daughter's hand tightened around mine. Small fingers digging into my palm like she was trying to anchor herself. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I already knew what they looked like standing there together. United in relief that the problem had removed itself, we walked down the driveway in silence. Snow crunched under my boots. My breath came out uneven, not from crying, but from the effort of staying steady. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. My daughter didn't say anything at first. She was 7. She'd learned early when not to ask questions. The car door stuck. I pulled harder than I needed to. She climbed in, curling herself into the seat, hugging her jacket like it was armor. I started the engine. The radio came on. Christmas music. I turned it off immediately. We drove for a minute before she spoke. "Mom," she said. Quiet. Did I do something wrong? That was the moment. Not when the bags hit the floor. Not when my mother looked at her like she was a stain. That question landed harder than all of it. I kept my eyes on the road. I told her no. I told her she was perfect. I told her none of this was her fault. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Inside, something was cracking open slowly, carefully, like it didn't want to make a sound. We didn't have a hotel. I'd planned to stay at my parents' house for 3 nights. I'd told myself it was for her. Christmas with family, a tree, cousins, normal. I ignored every warning sign that led up to it. The sighs on the phone. The way my sister paused too long before saying yes, of course you can come. The way my mother asked if I'd considered leaving my daughter with a friend to keep things simple. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and turned off the engine. The silence pressed in. My daughter stared out the window. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel for exactly 3 seconds. Not more. I didn't let myself cry. I booked a cheap motel on my phone. 1 room, 2 beds, no pool, no decorations. I told myself it was fine. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself a lot of things that night. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If you've ever been treated like this by family, hit like and subscribe, because this story proves what happens when you stop staying silent. The motel smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. The heater rattled like it might give up at any moment. I tucked my daughter into bed and sat on the edge of mine, listening to her breathing slow. She fell asleep fast. Kids do that. They carry things until their bodies decide they've had enough. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and replayed everything. My sister standing up, the way she didn't even look at me when she threw the bags, like I wasn't worth eye contact. My mother's voice. Calm. Certain. The certainty hurt the most. This wasn't an outburst. This was a verdict. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed things to keep the peace. The babysitting. The holidays I drove 6 hours alone, because no one offered help. The comments about my job, my apartment, the way I raised my child. I told myself they didn't mean it. I told myself family is complicated. I told myself love looked like endurance. That night, something shifted. Quietly. No dramatic vow. Just a realization settling in. They weren't confused about me. They were comfortable with how they treated me. In the morning, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister: "You embarrassed us. Mom's crying. You always make everything about you." I didn't reply. Another message came in, from my brother. A laughing emoji, a photo of the trash bags still by the door. Caption: "Wes, Santa came early." I turned the phone face down. My hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from anger, clean and sharp. It surprised me how calm it felt. I made waffles using the motel's tiny iron. They were uneven and slightly burnt. My daughter smiled like they were the best thing she'd ever eaten. We watched cartoons on low volume. For a few hours, it felt like a bubble. Safe. Separate. When we checked out, the clerk said, "Merry Christmas." I said it back. My voice sounded normal. The drive home was long. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain. I let the silence sit between us. Not heavy, just present. My daughter fell asleep with her head against the window, leaving a foggy oval on the glass. When we got back to our apartment, I carried the bags inside, not the trash bags. Our bags. I unlocked the door and set them down. The place smelled like the candle I'd blown out before we left. Pine and vanilla. I stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, and felt something unfamiliar. Relief. No one here would tell my child she didn't belong. No one here would laugh at us. No one here expected me to shrink. That night, after she went to bed, I opened my laptop. I hadn't planned to do anything. I just sat there, staring at the screen. My inbox was full. Messages I'd ignored for months. Opportunities I'd talked myself out of, because family needed something. Because I was tired. Because it wasn't the right time. I remembered what I'd said at the door. "I'll remember this." I meant it. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. The apartment was quiet in a way it hadn't been in weeks. No tension hanging in the air. No waiting for a phone to buzz with another demand disguised as concern. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. Cars passed. Someone walked their dog. Life kept moving, completely indifferent to what had happened to me the night before. That realization grounded me. The world didn't end because my family rejected us. It didn't even pause. My phone was face down on the counter. I didn't touch it right away. I already knew what was there. I could feel it, like static. When I finally flipped it over, there were missed calls. My mother, twice. A long message from my sister. Another from my aunt, who had apparently been briefed and assigned a role. I read my sister's message first. She said I'd overreacted. She said it was a joke that went too far. She said I needed to apologize for storming out and ruining Christmas. She said my daughter was sensitive because of how I raised her. She said a lot of things that all meant the same thing. "We hurt you. Now fix it for us." I didn't respond. I dropped my daughter off at school and sat in the car for a few minutes afterward, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. I watched her walk inside without looking back. She was okay. That mattered more than anything else. At work, I smiled when people said Merry Christmas. I answered emails. I focused. It wasn't hard. In fact, it was easier than it had been in months. There was a strange clarity to my thoughts, like something noisy had been turned off. Around noon, my mother called again. This time I answered. She didn't ask how we were. She didn't mention my daughter. She went straight to the point. "You embarrassed your sister," she said. "In front of everyone?" I listened. I didn't interrupt. She was trying to lighten the mood. My mother continued. "You know how she is. You always take things personally." I waited for the part where she acknowledged what was said. It didn't come. "I won't tolerate this kind of behavior," she added. "You owe her an apology." I looked at my reflection in the dark computer screen on my desk. I looked tired, older than I was. I thought about the trash bags. About my daughter's voice asking if she'd done something wrong. "No," I said. There was a pause. My mother didn't like pauses. They meant she was losing control of the conversation. "No," she repeated. "I'm not apologizing," I said. "And we won't be coming over again." Her voice sharpened. She said I was ungrateful. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said I'd regret this when I needed them. I let her finish. When she finally stopped, waiting for me to fill the silence, I didn't rush. "I already needed you," I said. Last night? Then I hung up. My hands were steady when I set the phone down. That surprised me. I'd imagined this moment so many times over the years, always ending in tears or shouting. Instead, it felt like closing a door that had been open too long, letting in cold air. That afternoon, my aunt's message came through. Families fight. That's just how it is. Be the bigger person. I deleted it without replying. By the end of the day, the narrative had been decided without me. I was dramatic, difficult, bitter. That was fine. I'd played that role before. The difference now was that I wasn't auditioning for forgiveness. At home, my daughter sat at the table coloring. She looked up and asked if Grandma was mad. I told her Grandma and I needed some space. I told her it wasn't about her. I told her our home was safe. I told her the truth in words she could carry. That night, after she went to bed, I opened a folder on my laptop I hadn't touched in a long time. Resumes. Old cover letters. Notes from interviews I never followed up on, because my sister needed help moving. Because my mother had a health scare that turned out to be nothing. Because someone always needed me to stay exactly where I was. I updated my resume. Slowly, carefully, line by line, it felt like reclaiming something I'd left behind. Over the next few weeks, the messages slowed. Then they shifted. My sister sent one that said she missed us. Another that said my daughter asked about her cousins. Another that said Mom wasn't doing well and stress was bad for her heart. I didn't respond to any of them. What I did do was apply for a position I'd wanted for years. It was a step up, more responsibility, more money, more visibility. I almost talked myself out of it. Old habits die hard. Then I remembered the sound of laughter behind me as I walked out into the cold. I clicked submit. 2 days later, my boss asked me into her office. She closed the door and said she'd been meaning to talk to me about growth opportunities. She said she'd noticed how much I'd been carrying without complaint. She said timing mattered. I listened. I answered honestly. I didn't downplay myself. That was new. When I left her office, my phone buzzed. A message from my brother. Mom's really upset. You should fix this before it gets worse. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed one sentence. I'm protecting my daughter. I didn't add anything else. The response never came. At night, when the apartment was quiet, the anger surfaced sometimes. Not explosive. Focused. It showed me moments I'd ignored. Patterns I'd excused. The way I was only welcome when I was useful or silent. I didn't push the anger away. I let it inform me. By January, the silence from my family was complete. No calls. No messages. No sudden emergencies. It was like I'd stepped out of a play and the actors didn't know what to do without me. I thought about the trash bags more than I wanted to. Not because they hurt, but because they clarified everything. They were a line drawn so clearly that pretending not to see it would have been dishonest. One night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she asked a question that stopped me. Mom, she said, are we bad people? I sat on the edge of her bed and took a breath. No, I said. We're just not where we're treated badly anymore. She nodded like that made sense. Then she smiled and turned over, already moving on. I stayed there a moment longer, watching her breathe, and understood something fully for the first time. Walking away hadn't broken me. It had freed me. By February, my name stopped coming up at family gatherings. I know because a cousin I still spoke to let it slip. Not out of loyalty. Out of habit. She said it casually, like weather. Like it meant nothing. They don't really talk about you anymore, she said. It's easier that way. I thanked her and changed the subject. That's when I realized something else had changed. Hearing that didn't hurt. It didn't even surprise me. It just confirmed what I already knew. I'd been a role. The moment I stopped playing it, the story rewrote itself without me. Work became louder. Meetings. Deadlines. People suddenly asking for my opinion and waiting for the answer. I didn't rush anymore. I didn't apologize before speaking. I noticed how often I'd done that before. I noticed how much space I took up now. One afternoon, I got the email. Subject line promotion. I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no dramatic reaction. No tears. Just a slow exhale. The kind that comes after holding your breath for years without realizing it. The raise meant I could finally move. Not immediately. Not impulsively. But soon. A better neighborhood. A school with more resources. A place where my daughter wouldn't hear raised voices through thin walls. I didn't tell my family. I told my daughter we were going to look at a new place. Her eyes lit up. She asked if she could have purple curtains. I said maybe. She hugged me hard enough to knock the air out of my lungs. That night, my sister reached out again. This time it wasn't guilt or anger. It was curiosity. So, are you still mad? I stared at the screen. That word, mad. Like this was a mood I'd wake up from. I'm not mad. I typed. I'm done. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. She wrote that she didn't mean what she said. That everyone was drinking. That mom didn't really think my daughter didn't belong. That I was making this bigger than it was. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her version of events. I sent one message. You said it. Everyone laughed. That was enough. She didn't respond. A week later, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I saw her through the peephole. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her hair looked like she'd rushed. She held a bag of groceries, like a peace offering you could return for store credit. I didn't open the door right away. I told my daughter to stay in her room. When I did open it, my mother smiled too quickly. I was in the area, she said. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. She looked around like she was inspecting something she'd once owned. She said she missed us. She said families say things they don't mean. She said my sister was struggling. She said my daughter needed her grandmother. I let her talk. I noticed how she never once said sorry. Not for the bags. Not for the words. Not for the silence. When she finally paused, I spoke. You told my daughter she didn't belong, I said. You looked at her and said that. My mother waved her hand. You're twisting it? No, I said. I'm remembering it? Her face hardened. She said I was holding a grudge. She said I was punishing everyone. She said I was selfish. I told her she needed to leave. She laughed, like I'd made a joke. I opened the door wider. She stopped laughing then. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Like something essential had been removed and replaced with something she didn't understand. This isn't over, she said. I nodded. For me, it is. She left without the groceries. That night, my phone blew up. My sister, my brother, even my father, who rarely spoke unless spoken to. I didn't answer any of them. The next day, I blocked their numbers, all of them, one by one. My hand didn't shake. I didn't cry. I felt tired. Deeply. Like after finishing something that took years. The move happened in March. The new apartment had light. Real light. Windows that didn't face brick walls. The school was 3 blocks away. My daughter walked there with me the first day, holding my hand, swinging it back and forth, like she was lighter. She made friends quickly. I watched from a distance as she laughed on the playground. Her shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. That's when the doubt tried to creep in. At night, when things were quiet, I wondered if I'd gone too far. If cutting them off was extreme. If I'd overreacted. Then I remembered the sound of laughter. The word reminder. The way no one followed us outside. The doubt didn't last. In April, I ran into my brother at the grocery store. He looked surprised to see me. Older. Less certain. He glanced around like he expected backup. He said Mom was asking about us. He said my sister was hurt. He said I'd changed. I had to. I said. He scoffed. You think you're better than us now? I looked at him. Really looked. And realized something that felt almost sad. I think I'm better to myself, I said. He didn't have a response for that. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A new email. From an address I didn't recognize. It was from my sister's husband. He said he didn't agree with how things went down. He said there were things I should know. He said maybe we could talk. I read it once. Then again, I didn't reply. Some doors don't need to be reopened to prove you're strong. By May, the quiet stopped feeling temporary. It settled in. Solid. Dependable. My daughter started calling the new apartment home, without hesitation. That word used to come with conditions. Now it didn't. The school counselor asked if everything was okay at home. Not because of problems. Because of improvement. My daughter spoke more in class. She volunteered answers. She stopped chewing the inside of her cheek raw. I listened without interrupting and nodded when appropriate. I didn't tell her why. I didn't need to. The past had a way of testing that calm. The first test came in the form of a certified letter. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Tight. Precise. Controlled. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the counter while I made dinner. I helped with homework. I read a bedtime story. Only after my daughter was asleep did I tear it open. It wasn't an apology. It was an invitation. A family meeting. Neutral location. A restaurant. My mother wrote that there had been misunderstandings. That things had been said on both sides. That it was time to move forward like adults. She added a final line in heavier ink. For your daughter's sake. I folded the letter once. Then again. Then slid it into the trash. 2 days later, my sister emailed me from a new address. She said Mom was scared. She said Dad wasn't sleeping. She said I was being cruel by cutting everyone off. She said my daughter deserved cousins and traditions and a complete family. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing. My daughter deserves safety. I didn't send anything else. That night, I dreamed about the trash bags again. This time, they didn't hit the floor. They were already there when I walked in, lined up neatly, waiting. I woke up before the dream finished, heart racing, and realized something important. The dream had changed. I wasn't shocked anymore. I wasn't frozen. I was aware. In June, my promotion became official. New title. New responsibilities. My name on projects that actually mattered. People listened when I spoke. They trusted me. I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I'd finally caught up to myself. That's when the second test came. My father called from a block number. I almost didn't answer. Something told me to. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. He didn't waste time. Your mother's sick, he said. I stayed quiet. She's been under a lot of stress, he added. This situation isn't helping. I asked what kind of sick. He hesitated, then said exhaustion. Anxiety. Tests pending, nothing definitive, everything vague, familiar. I'm not discussing this over the phone, I said. If there's something real, have a doctor call. Silence. She just wants to see her granddaughter, he said finally. That's not a right, I said. It's a responsibility. He exhaled sharply. You always were difficult. I ended the call. That night the guilt tried again. Harder this time. It brought memories with it. My mother brushing my hair when I was little. My father teaching me how to ride a bike. The way they used to be before I became inconvenient. I let myself feel it. Then I let it pass. Love doesn't erase harm. Time doesn't undo words said clearly and publicly. Being related doesn't mean being safe. In July, my sister's husband showed up. Not at my door. At my work. The receptionist called to ask if I knew him. I did. Unfortunately, I told her to send him away. He didn't leave. I went down myself. He stood there with his hands in his pockets. Trying to look casual. He said he just wanted to talk. He said things had gotten out of hand. He said my sister wasn't doing well. He said he always thought I was strong. I told him this wasn't appropriate. He leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. There are things you don't know, he said. Things that would change how you see everything. I looked at him steadily. If you knew something that mattered, I said, you would have said it when my child was humiliated. You didn't. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Don't come here again, I said. If you do, I'll involve security. He left without another word. That night, I sat on the balcony after my daughter went to sleep and watched the city lights flicker. I thought about how many chances I'd given. How many versions of myself I'd offered up, hoping one of them would finally be acceptable. None of them were. The third test came quietly. A school event. Family night. My daughter scanned the room while holding my hand. Parents, grandparents, siblings. I felt her grip tighten for half a second. Is it okay if it's just us? She asked. Yes, I said immediately. She smiled and relaxed. That was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing. Not because it was easy. Because it was clear. In August, I received a message from my aunt again. Your mother cries every day. I hope you can live with that. I typed a response. Deleted it. typed another. Deleted that too. I didn't send anything. Some people confuse consequences with cruelty. The last message came from my sister at the end of the month. No excuses. No manipulation. Just one line. I don't recognize you anymore. I stared at it, then replied. I finally do. She never wrote back. September arrived quietly. No announcements. No confrontations. Just a shift in the air. The kind you don't notice until you realize you're breathing easier. My daughter started second grade with a backpack that was too big for her shoulders and a confidence that surprised even her teacher. She raised her hand. She asked questions. She laughed loudly. When she talked about home, she said, "Weh." Without hesitation, one afternoon, she came back from school and told me they were doing family trees in class. I felt a familiar tension start to rise. I waited. She said, "I told them it's just me and my mom right now. And that's okay. Right now." I didn't correct her. I didn't add anything. I just nodded and told her I was proud of her. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about everything that had happened since Christmas. Not with anger, not even with sadness. With distance, I realized something important. They never asked how my daughter was doing. Not once, not in any message, not through anyone else. They talked about her. They used her. But they never asked about her. That was the answer I'd been waiting for without knowing it. In October, the consequences became visible. My sister stopped hosting holidays. I heard it through the same cousin who used to call out of habit. Apparently, no one wanted to take responsibility. My mother and sister weren't speaking. My brother had distanced himself after another argument. The center didn't hold without someone to blame. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't revenge. It was just reality. At work, I was asked to mentor a new hire. A young woman, nervous, smart, apologized too much. I recognized myself in her immediately. One afternoon, she thanked me for being direct but kind. She said it made her feel safe. Safe. That word followed me home. I started therapy in November. Not because I was breaking. Because I wanted to understand why I stayed as long as I did. Why it took trash bags on a holiday for me to finally stop hoping. The answers weren't dramatic. They were simple. Familiar patterns. Learned silence. Love confused with endurance. I forgave myself slowly. December came again. The city put up lights. Stores played the same songs. The calendar filled with invitations. This time I didn't feel dread. I didn't brace myself. I planned intentionally. We decorated our apartment with paper snowflakes and cheap ornaments. My daughter made one that looked like a star if you tilted your head and squinted. She insisted it go on top of the tree. On Christmas Eve, we baked cookies and burned half of them. We laughed. We stayed up too late watching a movie we'd already seen. There was no shouting, no tension, no performance, just us. My phone stayed silent, no last-minute messages, no guilt disguised as concern. They had finally accepted that I wasn't coming back to the version of myself they preferred, and I was okay with that. On Christmas morning, my daughter opened her gifts slowly, deliberately. She hugged me between each one. Not out of excitement, out of presence. Later that day she asked a question I didn't expect. "Mom," she said, "do you think they're sorry?" I considered it carefully. "I think they're sorry they lost control," I said. "Not sorry for what they did." She thought about that. Then nodded. "I'm glad we're here," she said. So was I. In January I ran into my mother at a distance. A grocery store. Different aisle. She saw me. Froze. Looked smaller than I remembered. Older. I didn't approach her. I didn't hide either. I simply finished what I was doing and walked away. She didn't follow. That was the last time I saw her. Not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with clarity. With boundaries that don't need defending. With peace that doesn't require permission. I used to think strength looked like staying. Like absorbing. Like being the bigger person no matter the cost. Now I know better. Strength is leaving without begging to be understood. Strength is choosing your child when everyone else tells you not to. Strength is remembering exactly who someone showed you they were and believing them. The trash bags didn't define me. They exposed them. And I never forgot that night. Not because it hurt, but because it finally taught me how to stop pretending.